living fully alive in every way. You're listening to Relationship Prescriptions with Dr. Carol.
Where does it hurt? Have you ever had a doctor ask you that? I certainly ask that to patients. Pain is a big deal. And pain is not only something that affects our bodies, it affects our minds and our souls as well. Chronic pain has become such an important issue in our world, in the medical field, but also far beyond that. The opioid epidemic has made that front and center, appropriately so. Well, Dr. Linda Mintle and Dr. James Cribbs have written a book, Living Beyond Pain, a holistic approach to manage pain and get your life back. What I love about this book, Living Beyond Pain, is it addresses the integrated nature of our bodies, our souls, our beings, and the integrated nature of pain. It's not usually only physical or only emotional or only spiritual. Usually it's all of the above. And Living Beyond Pain addresses that. All the many factors that go into a person's experience of pain and finding ways to maximize well-being and living beyond that. Well, my guest today is Dr. Linda Mintle. She is a Ph.D. She has authored a number of books. She's a speaker, a professor, a media personality, commenting on mental health as a national news consultant. She's a licensed therapist. She's the host of the Dr. Linda Mintle radio show on Faith Radio. I am just so excited to talk with Dr. Linda Mintle about her perspective as a psychologist and a professor dealing with the problem of pain and offering some very practical and full of hope suggestions. So here is my conversation with Dr. Linda Mintle. Well, Dr. Linda Mintle, thank you for addressing this topic and for being on our program today. Welcome.
Thanks, Dr. Carol. And you are in the action as a physician, and you know that there's been a huge issue with the opioid crisis. And when that all began, one of the things that the physician, Dr. James Cribbs, who co-authored this book with me, he and I were talking one day when we were just becoming aware of the opioid crisis. And we said, you know what, there's going to be a number of people that are suffering from chronic pain, and they might get squeezed in this crisis as the regulations change and the prescriptions are more tightened up. And so we wanted to address those 100 million people who are struggling with chronic pain and want some solutions to their pain. So that was one of the reasons why we wrote the book. And that's one of the reasons why I'm glad we're talking about it today, because some of your listeners are going to be those 100 million people who struggle.
Oh, yes. I see them in my practice. I talk about, or I hear from them, on my website and the podcast. This is such a huge topic for so many people. There is a statement that has been, set out there, sometimes derogatorily, but it bears us unpacking. And that's the statement, oh, the pain is just all in your head. Now, as a doctor, I know that there are very real physical reasons, but you as a psychologist address what is in our head. Talk about that connection and what that looks like for people who are dealing with chronic pain.
It's a very difficult thing, as you know, for somebody to hear when they really are in physical pain. And it is really a lack of understanding about the anatomy and the physiology of what happens with pain. And so people who are experiencing chronic pain have had a number of pain experiences or a number of issues related to that pain where their central nervous system really gets wound up. And part of the central nervous system is your brain. And so there are these ascending and descending pathways with pain. I don't want to go into all that because it's boring for most people. But one of the things is there are these gates that sort of open and close that go to the brain and then tell the brain that you're experiencing pain. And it's really important to understand with people who have chronic pain, that whole system of the pain pathways has basically been altered and changed, including the things that happen in the brain. We experience pain in our brain. We don't experience when we hit our thumb, we don't experience it at our thumb. We experience it in the brain. It's just the way we're created, the way we're wired, that the pain perception, which is what you feel, is actually in the brain. So in one respect, your pain is in your brain. It is in your head in that sense, but you're certainly not making it up. And in fact, what we think is going on with people in chronic pain is that the normal pain signal that happens whenever there's an acute injury begins to become changed. The central nervous system rewires, the brain rewires, and we have this sensation of pain. It's almost like thinking about an alarm system that's misfiring all the time, only the alarm is going off, which means that people are really experiencing pain. So part of the work that people have to do is to learn to calm down their central nervous system, and then also relax themselves a little bit and deal with what's going on in the brain that can actually rewire that brain so that they can not feel that pain on a regular basis.
This topic is a little personal for me in the sense that I have a very close family member who struggles with fibromyalgia, chronic pain. And she has gone through a lot of testing and tried a lot of different things. And she now is living without medication, but learning the lifestyle factors that are important in managing this. And I've seen up close and personal how what is going on in our environment, our relationships, our stress level, and all of that can make such a difference in the perception and experience of pain.
Yeah, and so one of the stories that we put in the book that I think is really helpful for when you're thinking about maybe what you have to do to get some relief from chronic pain. Dr. Cribbs's wife is a big Tour de France fan. She loves that bicycle race. And as we were looking at that, one of the things that we noticed was that for over 100 years, the British team had never won that race. And so they hired a new coach. That new coach came in and said, we're going to win that race. So I want you to think of this like winning the race with pain as I'm talking about this. The coach came in and said, okay, I'm going to look at every aspect of this race. I'm going to look at the handlebars. I'm going to look at the seats. I'm going to look at the color of the bikes. I'm going to look at the temperature outside. I'm going to look at what we're wearing, every single aspect. And he said to the team, if we can improve each of those aspects 1%, then the cumulative effect of that will be that we'll eventually win the race. His goal was 5 years, but the team actually won the race in 3 years. And so we thought about that story and we said, you know what, this is just like winning the race with chronic pain. There are so many things that you mentioned: lifestyle, diet, sleep, exercise, movement, all of the hydration, the way we think, the way we feel, our relationships, the stress that we have in our lives. If we begin to work on each one of those things and we improve them a little bit, what happens is people dramatically turn down the volume on pain and begin to improve their functioning tremendously.
The way you describe that actually feels so hopeful that there are things that can be done. As a medical doctor and in the spirituality and health research I've been involved with at times, one of the things that I see brought up in research in various ways is that people often do better by focusing on whatever aspects of life they can control. There may be 100 million things that you can't, but intentionally focusing on what you can control makes a difference in well-being. Does that play into dealing with chronic pain?
Absolutely. You really do. You have lost control in a lot of ways. And we acknowledge that. We're talking in the book about, people sometimes lose their work and their enjoyment and their passion, maybe even their identity, sometimes their relationships, because the pain is so great and it just interferes so much. But one of the things that we know about pain is wherever you focus your attention, that's going to make a difference. So if you focus your attention on what you've lost, instead of what you can build, even in the difficult time, then things begin to change in your life. So focusing on gratitude. There have been numbers of studies that have been done where if you wake up in the morning, now you don't feel well, let's say you wake up, you're in pain, but you start your day, and a lot of times with prayer, having scriptures like, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, is a hopeful, I can do this with God in my life and with the power of the Holy Spirit in me. And you begin to focus on gratitude and you say, I'm going to think of 3 things this morning that are positive in my life. Well, I'm still here. I still have my, my husband or my children or people that I'm really grateful for in my life. Hey, yesterday I wasn't able to take a walk, but today I'm getting out of bed and I'm making a couple of steps. If you begin to focus on the things in your life that are good, that are positive, and actually that's a scriptural principle from Philippians that says, think on things that are good. And there's a whole long list of very positive things we should be thinking on. That actually begins to change structurally the brain and begins to create a different type of rewiring in the brain. So one of the keys really is to start thinking about what can I do to deal with things that are going to be in a positive way. What can I control? I can control my words. I can actually regulate my emotions. I may have strong emotions, but I can learn to regulate them. I can control my thoughts. I don't have to let them go down a negative direction. One of the really high correlations with chronic pain is having catastrophic thoughts, where you think, oh no, I'm never going to be able to do this. Or look, I can't play ball with my grandkids. My life is over. That's an example of catastrophizing. And we know that the more you do that, the more your pain ramps up. So again, you can control your thoughts. You can control your emotions and regulate your emotions. And you can do a lot in your life with the lifestyle that's going to, again, make that pain turn way down and improve that functioning, which I want to say, Dr. Carol, that really is the goal. There are times when we can't always get rid of all pain, but one of the things we can do is really turn down that volume on pain. And the goal really is to do that, to desensitize that central nervous system, and then to improve everybody's functioning.
I love how you unpack some of those things that we can do even in chronic pain. That seems to me one of the core points in the section of your book where you talk, among other things, about how you changing one's beliefs can change the experience of pain. Holding on to the belief that it's never going to get any better, the belief that my life is over, that there's nothing I can do to change this, that it's always going to be this bad. Those beliefs limit any experience of life that is possible.
Well, it's not only that, but they actually, from a psychological point of view, what happens, and it's also spiritual, because this again goes nicely along the lines of what the Bible has to say to us. When you hold an assumption or a belief that something is going to be terrible and bad, then what that does is it generates your thoughts that are also negative. And then those negative thoughts that you have impact your emotional state. And then you feel bad. And then when you feel bad, that impacts your behavior, and you start avoiding things, and you start to get fearful, and you don't want to do stuff, and you isolate, and you feel rejected. So when you think about it, it's kind of circular, where your thoughts and beliefs, your beliefs impact your thoughts, which then impacts your emotions, which then impacts the way you behave, and that does impact your perception. And pain is a perception that's in the brain. And that's what we're working on. We're working on changing that pain perception so that the volume of pain goes down.
The medical doctor part of me, when I see people in a lot of pain, depression and related psychological mental health symptoms tend to be so common. And I think we know that in all aspects of the medical field. How would you talk with somebody who has lived with chronic pain and is wrestling with depression in combination with that? What can they do?
Yeah, so those are highly linked. So you can be in chronic pain and develop depression, or you can have depression before you have chronic pain, and that depression will make the chronic pain even worse. So you really do have to treat the depression. And I know you know as a medical doctor how important it is to treat depression, because it really affects so many things in life, including the longevity of life. So you need to look at what it is that is causing the depression. And if you need some help with an antidepressant, we talk a little bit about that. Not everybody wants to take a medication. There are also talk therapies. There's one that's very effective called cognitive behavioral therapy that can help people again with those beliefs and those thoughts and those emotions, and can help regulate all of that. That can really really affect the depression in a positive way. So I do want to say that depression is very common with chronic pain, but it is also very, very treatable. And so my message to pain patients is always, let's look and see if you're depressed. And if you are, let's make sure that we treat that. And we can treat it with talk therapy, maybe some medication, maybe a combination of both. And sometimes it's just getting at the root problem that's causing that depression and fixing that will really make a difference as well.
I remember a television commercial campaign a little bit ago that said depression hurts.
Mm.
And, so true. Frankly, right now, I don't even remember what medication was being promoted, which is not important at all. The point is, our bodies and minds and our spirits are so interconnected. And that just takes me back to what you were talking about a few minutes ago, where making small changes in all these multiple areas adds up to some real good outcomes.
Yeah, yeah, it doesn't. I think we need to remember too that in the brain, the pain shares the same real estate with our emotions. And so that's really important to understand that pain has a sensory path, which is, more of the things that you experience and feel, but it also has an emotional path. So again, because just exactly what you said, God has designed us in such a way that everything is so interrelated that the mind really can affect the body. And I think that's why there's so many times in the Bible where Jesus says, fear not, fear not. And then he tells us to take thoughts captive, and he tells us to think on things that are good and to give gratitude. He tells us to forgive, because when we don't forgive people, we develop bitterness and anger. And again, that makes pain go up. It amps up pain when we have those very negative emotions of fear and anxiety and depression and anger. All of that really makes pain worse because it's all interrelated in the brain. And it's also related in the spiritual, in that we know that if God is telling us how important it is to forgive someone and not hold on to anger, not only is it going to free us up spiritually, but it's also going to affect our body and our mind and make us better.
You have reminded me of some research I'm aware of that fascinates me, and that is the measurable changes in inflammatory substances in the blood and in the body based on whether somebody is holding on to bitterness, living in unforgiveness, or if they walk through a journey of choosing and learning to forgive. There's really very real biological measurable changes that induces in our body.
Yeah, and it relates a lot too to stress. And a lot of times when people are angry and upset, it's because they're stressed out. And as you and I know, it activates this stress axis in the body, and muscles tense up, making pain worse. Cortisol is relief, and that creates a lot of the inflammation that we're talking about. And your brain really has trouble filtering your pain signals when that happens. And so over time, your stressed brain gets more and more sensitized to processing pain, and then it takes less and less of that stimulus of pain to actually experience pain. So the body is really designed to want balance. And when pain and stress really disrupt this in the body, so the body is really trying to calm down, as well as your mind and your spirit. And again, if we can deal with all parts of ourselves, we can do a lot to impact the way we're going to feel in our own well-being.
Dr. Mintle, we've been talking about things that an individual can be aware of, can do, steps to take. But a core belief I have, and I believe you do too, is that God designed us to live and grow in community. Where
Yes.
do relationships and the people around us play into this journey with pain?
So relationships affect pain, and pain affects relationships. And if you've ever been with somebody who's been in chronic pain, for the person who's living with that person, it can be very exhausting at times. Sometimes the person can get demanding because they're frustrated at themselves, and they don't like being dependent on other people, and they don't like the powerlessness that they're feeling. So people in pain need a lot of emotional support. And there's really a fine line between helping someone and supporting someone who's dealing with chronic pain, and then enabling. Because you don't want to do for a person the things that they can do, because it's so important for someone in chronic pain to get up and do as much movement as possible. The movement is really a critical factor with chronic pain. There is no data to suggest that exercise ever worsens pain. exercise that's appropriate for the person. But there is a lot of data that says the more we get up and move and we go out and we do things and we engage with other people, one of the things that it does when we're in relationships, especially if we're serving other people, that we're thinking about what other people need, we're taking the focus off of our pain. And what happens in the brain is whatever you focus on, the brain says, oh, this is important. I've got to think about that. So if I'm serving someone, I'm helping someone, I'm in relationship with somebody, my brain is getting distracted away from my pain. And that's a really good thing. People in chronic pain need to stay in relationships. They need to really guard against feeling isolated and rejected and staying home and never talking to people, because again, those are things that are just going to ramp up the pain in someone's life.
That makes me think of people that I'm sure you know as well, who have lived with illness and pain for sometimes many years, but remain happy. You know, that you come
Mhm.
into their presence and they radiate life, and they're not focused on themselves. Now, we don't want to minimize the physical suffering that people living with chronic pain go through, but to just see those examples that it is possible to to grow through these experiences in a way that other people actually get uplifted by you focusing on them, that your life, even if you are living in pain, can still benefit others, can still have meaning.
That's right. And one of the things that you said is important, because when you are focusing on other people and you're doing things to serve and to still be functional with other people, it's not saying that you're not hurting. Nobody's saying that. But there is this the way that we're designed, that when we move our focus off of ourselves and onto somebody else, it does change the brain. I mean, it really does. And that really does help pain. But the thing to think about is that, you know, we're all broken. We all have issues in our life. We all have things that we need to work on, and sometimes we suffer. And I don't think the church has a real good theology of suffering. We need to understand that in this life we're going to have pain. We've been promised no relief until eventually we're with God in eternity, and then all pain will be gone. And boy, what a day that will be. But I think the thing to always think about when you're struggling, and I went through a period of this in my own life when I had some chronic pain related to back issues. You know, I remember that, you know, Jesus was acquainted with our grief and
Mm.
our sorrow. He suffered, and he understands that this is part of the human experience. He actually went through it. And if we can use that time to draw ourselves closer to God and be more dependent on him, then we're going to grow in our spiritual life. And I love the quote by C.S. Lewis where he said, God whispers in our pleasure, but he speaks in our conscience, but shouts in our pain.
Yes.
When you're in pain, you're hearing a lot of shouting from God, because you're so dependent and you need him so badly to help you get through that. So I think it's really important to understand. And again, I used an example of Viktor Frankl because so many people know him as a survivor of the Nazi concentration camps. He continues to remind us in his story that we have the freedom to choose our attitude in the middle of any kind of difficulty. And when we choose an attitude of joy in the Lord, not in our circumstances, but joy in the Lord, when we keep our eyes firmly focused on God and we have the power of the Holy Spirit in us, it's going to help us walk us through that difficulty. Jesus never leaves us. He never abandons us. He's with us in the middle of that suffering. That can create a new you, and it can refine us and deepen us and bring us to a new intimacy with God that maybe we would have never had if we had not gone through that difficulty.
Although physical pain has not been part of my journey, mental pain has. What you just described in the journey bringing you closer to God that you might not have experienced otherwise, I experienced that after the death of my husband. Although I am not glad he died, I am grateful for the journey that the process of grief has taken me through. It has made me closer to God. It has made
Mhm.
me deeper. And in that way, I can relate to what you're saying. You know, Dr. Mintle, you are addressing something real core that all human beings, but especially believers, wrestle with. And that is, God's promise that uh, he is present, the kingdom of God is here, but then we also still experience these heartaches, this pain. What about that person who has been praying for God to bring them relief, to heal them? And we can see scriptures that talk about God healing, and there's testimonies out there of people who experience that. But what if I'm not? What if that person listening is not experiencing that relief of pain? Talk about that experience with God in that kind of situation.
It's really such a mystery, because there are times when people are dramatically touched and healed. And we have examples of that in the Bible. When the woman touched the garment of Jesus, she was she'd been suffering for such a long time, and then she was healed, and he said, your faith has made you well. But then we know of so many people who love the Lord deeply. I mean, Johnny Erickson Tata comes to mind. Here's a woman who has sold out for Christ and has done so much, in spite of her condition, and maybe because of her condition, who continues to trust God even when it doesn't look like he's present. And there are those dark times of the soul that we go through, and we're anguished, and we say, God, why not? And so many of the times when I've talked to patients and I've talked to people who have gone through suffering, the shift comes when you start saying, instead of saying, why me, but you start to say, okay, God, what now? What now can you do? What now can you do through me, through this brokenness? And I use this example of it's an example from Japanese pottery, where the Japanese have this technique that they use where there's broken pottery, and they weave silver and gold into the broken parts of the pottery. And at the end, they begin to say that they think that the vessel is more beautiful from the brokenness and the silver and gold. And I just think that's a lovely metaphor for the way God sees us. We're broken, but he's weaving his silver and gold in us in the middle of those difficult times. He's bringing us closer to him. He's helping us experience his presence in the middle. And his promise has always been to walk us through the difficulty, not necessarily to always take us out of the difficulty. And so why do we suffer? I don't know. We just suffer because we're in a broken, fallen world. And we know there's a time coming when we won't. And we'll rejoice in that time. But in the meantime, we've got everything that we need to hold on. And I just think that Johnny's life is such a testament to someone who's been in pain. And her pain has worsened over years. There are times, and what she said one time when I was listening to her talk is, she said, I was complaining to God and telling him, really, God, I've done all these things and I'm still in pain and my pain is worsening. And she said, I just looked up and I had this vision of Jesus on the cross, and I understood what it meant to partake in his suffering. And I looked at those bloodied feet and I just said, oh Lord, help me.
Wow.
And so, God does. And when we do that, he sustains us in ways that we don't understand. Why he touches one person one way and another person another, we don't know. We don't have the view that God has. He has the whole picture view, and he sees how things work together for our good. And we don't see that. What he wants from us is trust, and to trust him, and to know that we can deal with anything that he brings to us because of him and the power of the resurrected Jesus who lives inside of us.
Dr. Mintle, that picture of the Japanese pottery, I have that in my mind. I can picture that, and what a beautiful illustration of what God can do with our lives, broken in the places where they are. Thank you so much for talking about this integrated way of addressing pain, so needed today. For our listeners who may want to find out more about you and follow what you're up to, where can they find you?
So it's real easy. It's just my name, although people misspell my name all the time. It's Dr. Linda Mintle. It's not mental, it's Mintle, but it's like mint with an L-E. So if you just go to my website, drlindamintle.com, you can find everything there. The blogs, the radio show, the podcast, all that is there. And then the books. And if you just go to amazon.com, you can also find the new book, Living Beyond Pain. And the hope of that is that we're going to continue to give people hope. There is hope. There is help. And don't fall for the lie that it's over and that there's nothing that you can do in this life and you're useless. Don't fall for that, because that's a lie of the enemy. There's always hope, and there's always something that God is going to do through you, no matter what the circumstance.
And we'll make sure those links are in our show notes as well. Dr. Mintle, it has been a joy and an honor to have you. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks, Carol. So great to talk to you.
If you are living with chronic pain, get this book. If you know somebody and love somebody who is, click on the link in the show notes or go to Amazon, find Living Beyond Pain, a holistic approach to manage pain and get your life back. Now, Dr. James Cribbs is a medical doctor of osteopathy. He has some sections in the book talking about the very physical aspects. Dr. Linda Mintle addresses many of the emotional, psychological. They together address the combination, address the spiritual components. Such a helpful way to address this very big problem. You can also connect with Dr. Linda Mintle by listening to her radio show, Dr. Linda Mintle radio show on Faith Radio, on her website, Dr. Linda Mintle. We'll make sure all those links are in the show notes as well as their social media. Thank you again for being part of our online family, here seeking to live fully alive in our lives and relationships. I would love to hear from you. If you have a question or a comment, you can send that to me directly on the podcast page on our website, drcarolministries.com. You are in my thoughts and prayers daily. I want you to know that, especially during this holiday season. I pray God blesses you, your family, those you care about. And if I can be of any help, support, prayer, give insight, I would love to hear from you. And now until next time, may God bless you.
Thank you for listening to Relationship Prescriptions with Dr. Carol. Our purpose is to provide trustworthy resources that help you and others live fully alive in every way as God intended. If you would like to help others experience transformation in their lives and relationships, we invite you to partner with us. Text the word GIVE, that's GIVE, to the number 512-980-1620. Or visit our website at drcarolministries.com/donate to make a one-time contribution or monthly gift. Your financial support allows us to expand our message and to help others. Thank you so much, and may God bless you.